Chapter 6 Fire and Frost Below. Building roar swept across the district. First a whisper, then a scream of engines as the first wave of air support dropped through the smoke. The ground shook under the pressure wash. Dust peeled away from the streets in spiraling sheets. Drake lifted his head, vision still swimming from the blast that had thrown him through a wall. The sky above him blazed with thruster light. Finally, he muttered, clutching the side of a burnt transport shell for balance. His earpiece crackled to life through static. A voice broke through, garbled, but alive. Command to ground unit Nest Drake. Reading you. Status. Drake pressed the transmitter to his mouth, coughing. Alive. Barely. Target green. Still active. Paint him for engagement. Full payload. Copy dat. Painting now. He lowered his arm, the comm still spitting static. The sense of control, thin and fragile, crept back into his lungs. Beside him, Ness pulled himself from the rubble, face streaked with dirt and blood. He spat a clot of dust onto the ground and scanned the scene. Troop drops coming in from the south. He rasped, looks like 3 dozen already on the ground. More behind them. The Blue Spartor was already turning toward the movement, its hulking frame half obscured by smoke and frost. The creature crouched low, one arm buried in the pavement, the other extended outward as a circle of liquid gathered around it, drawn from every shattered hydrant and broken pipe in sight. Ness motioned the incoming soldiers forward, shouting over the wind. Form on me. Flank pattern 2. Exclamation target blue key pressure constant. The first squad spread into position, rifles blazing as they advanced. The ice cracked and splintered under sustained fire, but every time a hole appeared, more water surged to fill it. The alien's arm swept sideways, pulling the flood back together into a gleaming barricade. Drake could see that even through the haze, the alien wasn't defending blindly. It was listening to them, feeling the rhythm of their fire and reshaping its wall in perfect countertime. From the rear, a corporal yelled, "What is that thing doing?" Ness fired another volley. Adapting, he ducked behind a wrecked carrier as a dozen razor-thin icicles shot from the barrier. They cut through the air like sniper rounds. One soldier went down instantly. Another screamed, clutching his throat. The projectiles melted as they passed through flesh, steam rising from the wounds. Drake's comm crackled again. Air division to ground. Target green locked. Awaiting confirmation. He crouched behind a fractured wall, peering across the ruined street. The Green Spartor stood tall in the open, its breathing slow and even, chest still glowing faintly where the earlier hits had landed. It hadn't moved since the air units arrived, just watched, head tilted, as though daring them. Confirmed, Drake said quietly, "You are cleared hot. Paint the green one." Across the city, automated defense systems awakened. Turrets that had been silent since the first portal pulse now turned in unison, their sensor syncing with the manual mark. Red targeting beams converged on a single point, T at the alien's chest. A heartbeat of stillness. Then the world ignited. Every defense installation, drone, and aircraft unloaded at once. The night vanished behind light and sound. Plasma bolts rained from above. Explosive shells hammered the ground. The air itself seemed to scream. The sonic booms overlapped. Drake dropped to his stomach, arms over his head as the shockwaves rolled over him. Heat seared the air. The entire district became a single, white-hot explosion. Ness yelled something he couldn't hear. The words were stolen by the storm. For 10 straight seconds the barrage didn't stop. Turrets overheated. Jets emptied their payloads. The ground melted to black glass. Then silence. The echo of the last missile faded into the distance. Smoke curled upward, glowing orange from molten wreckage beneath. The stench of burning composite hung heavy. Drake lifted his head, squinting through the haze. "Tell me that's gone," he whispered. Slowly, the air cleared. The Green Spartor still stood. Its armor was scarred, half molten, blue blood dripping from a single wound along its forearm, but that was all. The creature's head tilted up toward the hovering aircraft as though in quiet study. Around it, molten streets hissed under the falling rain of debris. Ness stared, disbelief written across his face. It just took all of that. No one moved. Even the gunfire against the Green Spartor faltered for a moment. Every soldier froze, transfixed by the impossible sight. The alien raised its arms slowly. Palms outward, green light crawled across its skin, condensing around its fingers until the glow turned blinding white. The air distorted, vibrating with the same frequency that had heralded the first portal. Drake felt the hair on his arms rise. Oh no, the blast came without sound. A dome of inverted energy erupted from the Spartor's body, expanding in every direction. The force hit the incoming aircraft first, dozens of them vanishing in fire before their wreckage even began to fall. Drones disintegrated midair, their metal shells twisting apart like leaves in a furnace. Turrets along the command wall detonated one after another, a rolling chain of explosions that painted the horizon red. The air pressure flattened everything that wasn't buried or bolted down. Drake and Ness hit the ground as the concussion rolled over them. The heat, so intense it beat, earned through their sleeves. When the wave passed, the sky itself looked wounded. Flames drifted upward, carried by unnatural winds. Ness coughed, dragging himself upright. Around them, silence had returned except for the low crackle of distant fires. Everything's gone, he rasped. All of it. Drake forced himself to his knees. His ears rang. He could barely hear his own voice. Ground units checked and no response. Only static. He looked toward the remaining soldiers. Those still alive were crouched among the wreckage, stunned but breathing. Beyond them, the Blue Spartor still fought. The alien had taken advantage of the confusion, retreating behind a dome of ice that spanned nearly half the street. Every few seconds it flicked its fingers through gaps in the barrier, firing razor-thin shards that found exposed targets with merciless precision. Each flick cost another life. Ness stumbled forward, grabbing a fallen radio from one of the dead. "We've still got bodies here," he shouted to the survivors. "Reform the line. Keep that thing pinned. Move!" The soldiers responded out of instinct more than hope, forming a jagged semicircle and laying down suppressive fire. The noise of the rifles was thin compared to what had just shaken the sky, but it was all they had left. Drake staggered beside him, half blind from smoke. "Air command's down," he said, voice hoarse. "Everything's on us now." "Then we make it count," Ness answered. The Blue Spartor shifted again inside its cocoon. The shields rippled like liquid glass, light refracting through each layer of ice. That monster had turned the battlefield into its element. With every hydrant burst and every drop of moisture pulled from the air, it grew stronger. "Keep firing," Ness yelled. "Concentrate on the left side. Look for stress fractures." A squad obeyed, pouring concentrated fire into one portion of the shield. The ice splintered, spraying shards into the air. For a moment, it looked like the wall might collapse, until the alien raised one hand and the surrounding water rushed in to seal the break. The soldiers' cheers died in their throats. Then came the retaliation. A small movement, just a flick of the alien's wrist, and a dozen translucent bullets whipped through the air. Every one of them hit. Helmets snapped back, rifles fell silent, men and women dropped where they stood. Ness ducked behind the smoldering remains of a carrier. He slammed a new power cell into his rifle, jaw tight. "He's picking us off like practice targets." Drake crouched beside him, eyes scanning for any tactical advantage. The light from the burning skyline reflected off his face, carving hard lines of exhaustion into his expression. "We can't stay clustered. Split fire. Move every 5 seconds. Make him choose." They rose together and fired again, each burst cutting narrow holes into the translucent dome before sealing again. The street had become a war zone of steam and glass, a constant rhythm of breaking and reforming. High above, the last of the downed drones burned out of the sky, raining molten fragments that hissed as they struck the eyes. For a moment, the only sounds were gunfire, the sea, rack of freezing water, and the faint hum of the Blue Spartor somewhere beyond the smoke, silent now, but alive. Ness reloaded, breath shallow. "He's just watching us, isn't he?" Drake didn't look away from the blue one. "Yeah," he said quietly, and waiting, the realization hung between them heavier than the smoke. The air smelled of frost and blood. The surviving soldiers were running out of ammunition. From the bunker far below, Abby and Kate felt the world trembling again, the dull, rhythmic thunder of a war that refused to end. Dust drifted from the ceiling in slow pulses. Emily covered her ears. Bash pressed his hand against the metal wall, and Abby stood perfectly still, listening to the distant, terrible heartbeat of the battle. "Thank you for reading this chapter. Your support means the world to me. If you enjoyed it, please consider giving a thumbs up, leaving a positive review or a comment. It truly helps a debut author like myself. As this is my first novel, I am still learning, and I would love to hear your constructive feedback to help me improve. I'll do my best to reply to your comments." Rundock Chapter 7. The cost of fire. Smoke rolled low across the streets, thick enough to taste. Every breath burned. The hiss of melting ice filled the air like static, punctuated by short bursts of gunfire and the distant groan of collapsing steel. The Blue Spartor hadn't moved far from the center of the block. It didn't need to. The alien crouched within a dome of shifting ice that pulsed like a living heart, drawing from every shattered hydrant and ruptured wall to remain around it. Every bullet that struck the barrier carved a crater that sealed again within seconds. Drake leaned against the twisted frame of a ruined transport, blood seeping through his torn pant leg. The hit had come moments ago, an eye shard that punched clean through his calf and melted almost instantly, leaving a cauterized hole rimed with frost. He wrapped the wound tight with a strip of uniform to slow the bleeding and kept moving. Pain was background noise now. Across the street, Ness stuck behind a barricade of debris, signaling what few soldiers remained. The air smelled of iron. The once organized line of Alliance troops had become scattered pockets of survivors, each fighting from whatever cover they could find. "Reload and rotate," Ness shouted. "Left flank, 30-meter push. Keep the pressure out." 3 soldiers obeyed, crawling forward through the rubble to new positions. Their rifles spat bursts of blue-white light that carved more scars into the eyes. The Blue Spartor finally shifted, lowering one arm. Water from the gutters and the pooled runoff coiled upward, merging into his palm. It gleamed translucent for a second before hardening into narrow, crystalline shards. Drake saw it forming and yelled, "Cover! Now!" The first volley came like machine gun fire. The shards screamed through the smoke, slicing through metal, stone, and flesh. One soldier fell before he could move. Another dropped beside Drake with a hole through his chest plate. The air filled with misting red before freezing into a fine frost. Drake's radio hissed and died. He threw it aside and fired back blindly, the recoil driving pain up his injured leg. "He's cutting us apart." Ness slid across the pavement to cover beside him, reloading as he moved. "We can't hit him from here. He's controlling the entire field." Drake grimaced. "Then we shrink it." The 2 men rose together and sprinted forward, firing in tandem. The rifles hummed against their palms, both striking the same section of the barrier. The ice flared, cracked, and began to buckle. Ness dropped to one knee and let loose another burst. This time the rounds punched through. One shot struck the Spartor's arm, then another, and another, until a final blast tore the entire hand away in a spray of glowing fluid and shattered eyes. The alien's roar cut through the battlefield, deep in metal, like the sound vibrating through the concrete. Steam poured from the wound as it stumbled back, the barrier faltering for the first time. "Got him," Ness shouted, chest heaving. "He's bleeding." But the victory lasted seconds. The Spartor slammed its remaining hand into the ground. Water burst upward again, surging through cracks in the street to rebuild the shield. The new ice shimmered darker, denser, like tempered glass. Drake looked around. There were fewer than 10 soldiers still standing. Some were out of ammunition, others scrambling through the bodies for spare magazines. The sound of rifles grew uneven, desperate. He limped to cover beside a half-buried troop carrier. The blood soaking his pant leg had frozen stiff in the cold. "How many mags left?" "2," Ness said. "And how F the men don't even have that." Drake stared across the ruined street at the towering shape behind its fortress of ice. "Then we make them count." The next few minutes dissolved into chaos. The Alliance troops fired until their weapons hissed empty. When the magazines ran dry, they scavenged from the dead, switching rifles, sharing ammunition, throwing spent cells aside. The noise of battle became fragmented, fading in and out like the last breaths of a dying machine. The Spartor stayed patient. Every time someone broke cover for more than 3 seconds, it found them. A flick of its fingers, a flash of silver light, and another soldier dropped. Drake tried to move positions, but his leg gave out, sending him to the ground. He crawled behind a mound of debris, clutching his rifle. SS hauled him the last few feet, eyes scanning the horizon. "We're running out of bodies," Ness muttered. "We already ran out," Drake replied. His voice was hoarse, almost gone. "We just haven't stopped moving yet." Another burst of ice round shattered the concrete inches above their heads. The fragments stung against exposed skin. The transport behind them groaned as the barrage chipped it apart. When the noise stopped, Drake risked a glance. Only 3 soldiers were still firing, and then 2. Then 1. The rest lay scattered across the street, frozen where they fell. Ness exhaled slowly. "That's it. That's all of us." They were cornered now. 3 living souls pressed against the side of a burning transport, the heat on one side and the cold of the Spartor on the other. The alien moved closer, its gait uneven from the missing hand but no less terrifying. Frost trailed behind its steps. It raised its remaining arm, the air around it swirling with vapor. Tiny points of light formed around its fingertips, hundreds of them, condensing into the shape of a dozen perfect, glistening projectiles. Drake braced the rifle against his shoulder, jaw tight. "On my mark." But he never gave it. It came from nowhere, a throwing knife. It cut through the smoke in a silver blur and struck the Spartor in the side of the head, burying itself to the hilt. The alien's concentration broke. The forming ice bullets disintegrated into mist. Another knife followed, then another. Each landed with precision, thudding into armor and exposed flesh in rapid succession. The Spartor staggered, twisting to find the source. Ness blinked, disbelieving. Who the hell? More shapes cut through the air, throwing stars, balanced, spinning perfectly, found their marks one after another. The first buried itself in the alien's temple. The next 2 slammed into its eyes. Blue light sprayed outward like shattered glass. The Spartor bellowed, stumbling backward, swinging its remaining arm wildly. The final cluster of stars hit deep into its skull. The glow in its chest flickered. It fell to one knee, then another. With a sound like cracking ice, the creature's entire body slumped forward, smashing into the ground. The massive ice shield around it shattered and fell in fragments, raining across the battlefield like frozen rain. Drake raised his rifle and fired one deliberate shot into the back of its head. The echo bounced off the ruins, then died. Silence returned. Ness stared across the street, breathing hard. Tell me I'm not seeing ghosts. A figure stepped from the smoke. Abby, her hair clung to her face with sweat and frost. Her jacket was too thin for the cold, her eyes too sharp for her age. In her hands were the same knives her father had given her on her 9th birthday. The metal darkened with alien blood. Drake lowered his weapon slowly. Abby Howe. She ignored him, gaze fixed on the fallen monster. I saw what was happening. Her voice was steady, but each word shook with rage. I saw them dying. You needed help. She looked down at the blades, the edges still trembling faintly in her grip. Dad always said you only get one perfect throw if it matters, and, Ness stood, taking a slow step forward. You shouldn't be out here. Neither should any of you, she said quietly. For a long moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the dripping of water as the ice melted into puddles around the alien's body. Steam curled into the night air. Drake finally exhaled, the tension in his shoulders easing just enough for exhaustion to take hold. He glanced toward the distant ridge, where faint green lights still pulsed Green Spartor. Silent, waiting, the Abbey followed his gaze. Her hands tightened around the knives. Now how the hell are we supposed to kill that one? Thank you for reading this chapter. Your support means the world to me. If you enjoyed it, please consider giving a thumbs up, leaving a positive review or a comment. It truly helps a debut author like myself. As this is my first novel, I am still learning, and I would love to hear your constructive feedback to help me improve. I'll do my best to reply to your comments. Rundock Chapter 8. Reflection. The answer came in motion. At first there was only vibration, an irregular pulse crawling through the broken pavement beneath their feet. Then the Green Spartor took a single step forward. The sound of its footfall was deeper than thunder. Pebbles danced across the ground. The air grew heavier, colder, until every breath left a small white ghost hanging in front of them. Kyle's finger tightened on his useless rifle before he caught himself and lowered it. Drake stood beside him, one sleeve torn, blood drying against his cheek. Behind them the last remaining alliance. Soldier hovered, little more than a kid, his eyes fixed wide on the towering shape moving through the smoke. No one spoke at first. The only noise was the faint crackle of distant fires and the slow scrape of the Spartor's gait. Drake finally exhaled through clenched teeth. Suggestions? Kyle kept watching the alien, measuring its pace. None that don't end ugly. Abby's tone was sharper, steady in a way that didn't match her trembling hands. You saw it take everything from the airstrike and send it back. You shoot, you die. Simple math. Drake let out a bitter laugh that turned into a cough. So no bullets, no backup, and no bright ideas. The Spartor kept closing the distance, 17 meters, 60. The faint shimmer of frost beginning to trail its steps. Each footfall left a thigh, and crust of ice spreading across the fractured street. Kyle crouched, pulling at the comm on Drake's shoulder. Static hissed back at him. Still fried, Drake smacked the device with his palm. Figures. They gathered close, speaking fast and low. If he mirrors energy, Kyle said, we stay physical, hit and move. No plasma, no charges. With what? Drake asked. We're out of steel. Then we make do. Abby's eyes tracked the frost spreading behind the alien's legs. He's freezing the ground, she said quietly. Looks like he can control ice just like the blue one. Drake followed her gaze, watching the frost shimmer and crawl outward in rhythm with the creature's breathing. Perfect, he muttered. He already shrugged off everything we threw at him, and now he's a damn walking glacier. Two. The ground trembled again. Their fourth man, the young soldier, shifted nervously from foot to foot. He whispered something under his breath, half prayer, half curse. 50 meters. The alien's skin glowed faintly beneath the frost, veins of emerald light tracing its muscles. Hold your ground, Drake ordered. The soldier didn't. Panic cracked something inside him. He spun and bolted up the ruined street, firing wildly over his shoulder. Each bolt flared blue in the darkness, most missing by yards, a few glancing off the creature's armor with harmless sparks. Stand down, Drake roared. The man didn't even look back. He just ran. Then one of his stray shots struck true, grazed the Spartor's face and tore a shallow gash across its cheek. The impact was strong enough to snap the alien's head sideways. A fine mist of blue blood sprang into the cold air before crystallizing into glittering shards. For half a heartbeat the creature stood motionless, stunned not by pain but by surprise. Then its head rotated back toward the fleeing soldier, the wound already icing over expression unreadable and furious. The Spartor raised both hands, the air around its fingers distorting with a high-pitched hum. Energy gathered, condensing into a blinding white point that pulsed once, then discharged in a perfect line of light. The beam struck the soldier mid-stride, punching through his armor and spine in one silent instant. His body folded as he fell, steam rising from the scorched crater in his chest. The silence that followed was worse than the scream that never came. Drake's voice dropped to a growl. Weapons down. Drake kicked his useless rifle aside. It clattered across the frost-slick street. We fight with what we can touch. Abby followed without hesitation. No power, no reflection. Together they scavenged through the bodies. The air stank of burnt circuitry and coolant. Abby pried open a fallen medic's pack, finding a compact baton and a short blade still in its sheath. Kyle ripped a combat knife from a corpse and 2 metal batons from another's broken rig. Drake worked the bayonet off a shattered rifle and tested the edge against his thumb. The Spartor was 40 meters away now. Spread out, Kyle said. Keep it guessing. Drake nodded once. And stay moving. If he locks eyes, duck. They formed a loose triangle, backs to each other. The RTH man's body still steamed in the distance, a reminder of how fast mistakes ended. At 30 meters, the alien halted. Its chest expanded as it inhaled, a sound like the grinding of stone echoing from within. Its remaining hand rose, fingers unfurling. Kyle shouted, "What do you want?" The answer came in that guttural, resonant tone, layers of sound, impossible syllables that made their ribs vibrate. It wasn't speech, it was an earthquake pretending to talk. Then the ground moved. Chunks of concrete tore free, hovering in a slow spiral around the alien. Street lamps bent, snapping off their bases. Dust rose in a perfect circle. Earth control 2, Drake muttered, just like the brown one. Then don't give them time, Kyle snapped. Oh, all 3 charged. The alien's eyes flashed and the floating debris launched outward. Fragments of street and steel whirled through the air. Abby ducked beneath one slab, feeling the wind of it clip her hair. Drake rolled over a fissure just before a spear of rebar embedded where he'd been. Kyle dove headlong through a spray of gravel, came up low, and drove his batons into the Spartor's knee. The impact made a sound like cracking glass. Blue ichor spilled down its leg. Drake followed in, bayonet flashing, carting into the creature's thigh. The aliens were ripped through the night, low and furious like an animal. Abby struck last, darting behind and slicing along its ribs. She rolled clear as the Spartor swung a massive backhand that split the air in front of her. Kyle shouted, "Keep it off balance." For a brief span of seconds, it almost looked human, bleeding, stumbling, turning too slowly. Then it changed again. The ground convulsed. A ridge of asphalt lifted like a wave, throwing Kyle sideways. Abby stumbled, catching herself on the frozen body of a fallen trooper. Drake tried to drive forward, but the street itself buckled under his dress shoes. The Spartor slammed its fist into the ground. The shockwave tossed all 3 backward. Dust and frost exploded outward. Abby hit hard, rolled, and slid until her shoulder struck something solid. She blinked through the haze and realized what it was: the corpse of the blue alien, the one she'd killed. Its armor glinted faintly under the fires, still studded with the knives and stars she'd thrown hours, or was it moments ago? Her heart pounded. Her lungs earned. She reached for the nearest knife and yanked. It came free with a wet sound and a spray of blue fluid. Another, then another. She worked fast, driven by instinct rather than thought, collecting every weapon she could hold. By the time the last star was out, her palms were slick and her reflection shone in the pooled blood at her knees. The noise of battle returned. Kyle and Drake were fighting again, closing from opposite flanks. Their blades flashed dull in the cold light. "Left side open," Kyle yelled. Drake feinted right, then stabbed upward beneath the alien's arm. The bayonet sank deep, cutting through tendon and frost alike. He pulled back, ready to strike again, but the Spartor's arm shot out and clamped onto his shoulder. "Drake!" Abby screamed. The alien lifted him off the ground as if he weighed nothing. Drake twisted, slammed his weapon into its chest. The Spartor barely noticed. Kyle charged, batons raised, yelling something wordless. He didn't make it. The Spartor's other arm, longer than any human limb, had a right to be swung in a blur. The blow connected squarely with Drake's head. The crack echoed down the street. Drake's body went limp. The alien tossed him aside. Kyle's scream tore through the cold. He drove one baton, then the other, into the creature's torso, hacking at it like a man possessed. The Spartor backhanded him, sending him skidding across the ice. Abby froze where she knelt, knives dripping in her hands. To her the world had gone silent except for her breathing and the low hum of the alien's pulse. The Spartor stood over Key's body, blue blood and human blood mixing at its feet. The cuts across its chest and arms shimmered faintly and then began to close. Flesh reknitted, ice melting into smooth skin. Even the stump of its missing hand twitched, sprouting faint tendrils of new growth before sealing over in crystalline frost. Abby's throat constricted. Cal groaned somewhere to her side, trying to stand. The tremor subsided, replaced by a low rumble deep beneath the earth. Pebbles rolled toward the alien's feet, drawn by some invisible force. The ground seemed to breathe with it. Abby crouched lower, collecting the last of her blades. Each one gleamed dull silver in the firelight. Her hands shook, but she didn't drop them. She looked from Drake's still form to the monster rebuilding itself before her. Yes, she felt nothing for a moment. No fear, no pain, just a clean, hollow calm. The Spartor turned its head, the glow behind its eyes steady and cold. Abby didn't move. She slid one knife into her belt, another into her palm. The air around them hung motionless, the last of the fires flickering low. She could hear her own heart beat again, slow and even. Behind her, the dead Blue Spartor lay still, its open eyes reflecting the orange sky. She saw herself in that reflection, small, blood-spattered, alive. The alien took one step toward her. Frost spider webbed across the ground. Abby inhaled once through her nose, steady, deliberate, like her father had taught her years ago on the range. Thank you for reading this chapter. Your support means the world to me. If you enjoyed it, please Insider giving a thumbs up, leaving a positive review or a comment. It truly helps a debut author like myself. As this is my first novel, I am still learning, and I would love to hear your constructive feedback to help me improve. I'll do my best to reply to your comments. Brundock Chapter 9, Inheritance. For a long moment neither of them moved. Abby and the Spartor faced each other across the fractured street, the space between them heavy with cold. Frost crept outward from its feet, crawling over the debris like living veins. The fires from the ruin blocked through an amber haze against the green glow pulsing under its skin. Her breath came out in short clouds, knife poised, muscles locked. She could hear only her heartbeat and somewhere to her right, Kyle's ragged breathing as he tried to stand. The sound drew the alien's attention. Its head turned sharply, those pupilless eyes fixing on movement. Abby saw it happen, the slight tilt, the low mechanical hum that came from deep in its chest. The instant its focus shifted, she knew what was coming. "Kyle, don't!" she shouted, but he was already half upright, bracing on one knee. The Spartor's shoulders rolled once, predator smooth, and began to walk. Every step cracked the ground and left a white bloom of frost. Kyle staggered backward, searching the rubble for his fallen baton and finding only dust. Abby screamed again, throwing her first knife. The blade whistled through the cold and buried itself in the alien's thigh. It barely reacted. The next knife struck its arm, then another sank into its side. Nothing slow. Did it. The Spartor kept advancing, silent and implacable. Its eyes locked on Kyle like a hunter that had already chosen where to bite. "Look at me!" Abby shouted, throwing another blade. It struck the creature's shoulder and stayed there, trembling. But the alien didn't even flinch. It reached Kyle in 3 more steps. Kyle tried to roll away, but the alien's shadow covered him. The massive hand came down, fingers stretching, ready to close around his skull. Then a rock smashed into its face. The impact made a sharp crack, more insult than injury, but it stopped the Spartor mid-motion. Pebbles scattered across the frost. A second rock followed, then another, both hitting square against its temple. The alien recoiled slightly, head snapping sideways, confused by the new angle of attack. Abby looked toward the source and her breath caught. Kate stood near the house entrance, arm drawn for another throw. Her face was pale, jaw tight, hair whipped wild by the wind, but her stance was perfect, feet set, shoulders aligned, eyes locked on target. Decades of softball games and training distilled into one steady motion. She wound up again and hurled another stone, the pitch smooth and fast. It cracked against the Spartor's cheekbone and sent a thin spray of blue blood into the air. "Get away from him!" she yelled. The alien turned toward her, confused for a heartbeat by this new defiance. Abby seized the chance and launched another volley of knives and stars. 2 hit its chest. One struck near the eye, another sliced across the ribs. The creature reeled back under the combined net assault, more irritated than wounded, but the rhythm of its approach finally broke. Kyle crawled sideways, dragging himself behind a half-collapsed wall. His breath came in sharp, wet gasps. Keep him busy," he croaked. Abby and Kate obeyed without words. Abby's knives flashed in quick arcs of silver. Kate's stones flew in perfect rhythm, each pitch an echo of the last. The alien began to stumble, its once measured pace turning clumsy under the constant impacts. Tiny streaks of blue blood dotted the snow around its feet. Abby's arm ached from throwing, but she didn't stop. Come on, she muttered between breaths, drawing another blade. The alien roared and swung one arm through the air, sending a gust of freezing wind that shattered nearby glass. The blast forced them both back several steps, but it gave Kyle enough time to crawl farther from the fight. He made it almost 20 feet before a whisper reached him through the smoke. Dad! He turned, startled. Bash crouched in the open bunker doorway, eyes wide and shining in the firelight. In his hands was a fixed-blade knife, the same one Kyle had carried through every mission with the executioners, a weapon passed down from his father before his first deployment. The leather on the hilt was darkened from years of sweat and sand, the blade still flawless, honed to a razor sheen. Take it, the boy hissed. Bash, what are you doing out here? Kyle limped toward him, keeping low. You need this. You always said never to fight empty-handed. Get back inside, Kyle snapped. Boy's hoarse. Now, no PR. Odic to your sister. Bash hesitated, gripping the dagger tighter. But now, Bash. The boy pressed the weapon into his father's hand and backed away, eyes wide with fear. Don't die, he whispered, then disappeared into the dark of the bunker. Kyle stared down at the blade for half a second, still glinting with reflections of the fire outside, then turned back toward the street. Abby had run out of knives. Her belt was empty, and the ground around her was littered with spent weapons. She crouched, picking up anything she could find: broken glass, metal scraps, shards of rebar, and threw them with the same quick precision her father had taught her years ago. Every throw hit something: shoulder, leg, chest. The alien was covered in punctures and shards now, a walking mosaic of steel and glass. Yet it kept coming. Kate's arm was tiring. Her last few throws wobbled, hitting but not with the same snap. Still she refused to retreat. She stooped, grabbed another stone, and hurled it with both hands. It struck the Spartor square in the mouth. That got its attention. The creature turned, enraged, ignoring Abby for the first time and focusing on the woman who dared stand against it. But after a moment its head shifted again, gaze sliding back to Abby. It had learned which of them was the real threat. The frost around its feet thickened, crackling as it advanced. Its chest heaved with slow, deliberate breaths, the sound deep enough to make the debris vibrate. Mom, move, Abby yelled. Kate stumbled back a few steps, grabbing another rock but too winded to throw. The dolly, and closed the gap 10 yards, then 5. Abby kept retreating, slipping on the frozen ground, scrambling for anything sharp. Her fingers found a broken bottle neck, and she hurled it. It shattered harmlessly against the Spartor's arm. Kyle came from nowhere. He slid across the ice on one knee, the dagger flashing in his hand, and drove the blade in a long horizontal cut across the creature's Achilles. The steel bit deep, severing the tendon with a wet snap. The Spartor's roar ripped through the night. It staggered, nearly dropping to one knee, the ground trembling with the force of it. Steam poured from the wound, blue blood pooling at its feet. Abby caught her breath, backing away as Kyle rolled clear. You got him. For a moment it looked true. The alien lurched, struggling to find Bob. Lance. Its breath came in ragged bursts, but then something strange happened. The metal lodged in its flesh, knives, shards, rebar began to glow faintly, soft white light spreading from each embedded piece. The light merged into thin rivers that flowed over the creature's skin. One by one the metals began to liquefy, merging into the ones they had created. The flow was slow but relentless, silver veins sealing blue gashes, hardening into dull armor that steamed in the cold. Abby stared, speechless. The smell of hot metal filled the air. Small drops hissed as they hit the frozen ground. What the hell is it doing? Kate whispered. Kyle rose to one knee, eyes wide. It's stopping the bleeding. The Spartor straightened, unsteady but still towering. Its lower leg glistened where the molten metal had sealed the wound, but the fused layer was rough and uneven, streaked with dull silver veins. The rebar in its back hadn't vanished, only warped, leaving jagged ends still jutting out like broken spines. Across its torso, shards of knives and steel fragments protruded from half-sealed wounds. The metal hardened around them as if the creature had welded its own injuries shut. Every puncture gleamed faintly in the firelight, half-healed, half-forged, and wholly wrong. Abby gripped one last throwing star, knuckles white. That's not possible. The alien turned toward them, breathing slow again, its skin now a patchwork of green flesh and dull metal plates. It flexed its hand, a rasp of steel against stone echoing in the silence. Kyle took a step forward, the dagger steady in his grip. He's not invincible, he said through clenched teeth. He's just adapting. Thank you for reading this chapter. Your support means the world to me. If you enjoyed it, please consider giving a thumbs up, leaving a positive review or a comment. It truly helps a debut author like myself. As this is my first novel, I am still learning, and I would love to hear your constructive feedback to help me improve. I'll do my best to reply to your comments. Brundock Chapter 10. Pressure frost thickened over the broken street until it glittered like shattered glass. The air felt heavy, dense enough to breathe wrong. The Spartor's body pulsed with jagged light, each flare sharper than the last. Its chest heaved in short, violent bursts that sounded more like growls than breath. Frostbite seek in beneath its feet, erupting into spikes that cracked with every exhale. It was done calculating. Rage replaced its typical slow, methodical approach. The alien let out a guttural roar that shook the street, a sound torn between thunder and metal grinding. Its muscles tensed, armor flesh flexing as blue veins burned bright under its skin. Then it snapped, hands jerking up, energy spilling uncontrolled. Ice erupted outward. Then it moved. A flick of one hand, and shards of ice snapped through the air. Kyle, Abby, and Kate scattered without thinking. The first volley cut through the wreckage, slamming into metal with shrill cracks. Abby dug behind the burnt-out husk of a transport, ice splinters raining around her. Kyle rolled behind a broken barricade 20 yards away. Lungs burned, ing from the sudden chill. The cold bit deep, but for him and Abby it wasn't new. After the Arctic mission, their bodies knew how to move through freezing air without locking up. Across the street, Kate ducked behind an overturned streetcar, clutching the stones she'd gathered, her breath coming in short. Shock bursts as the frost thickened around her. More ice bullets tore through the air, each flick of the Spartor's fingers launching another barrage. The street filled with the sound of cracking frost and ricochets. Shards embedded themselves into metal and concrete, leaving clusters of frozen spines that steamed faintly in the firelight but refused to melt. Then the creature raised its other hand. Its fingers curled slowly, as if gripping something invisible. The ground trembled. Near Abby, concrete groaned, splitting apart. The rubble beneath her boots began to rise in jagged chunks, lifting into the air piece by piece. She darted sideways, sliding behind a bent girder just as the slab she'd been using for cover rose clear off the ground. Kyle saw the movement from across the way, his chest seized with panic. Abby moved. She sprinted just in time. The levitating debris exploded outward, spraying dust and metal shards. A boulder-sized chunk crashed where she'd been seconds earlier. Kate used the opening. She stood, drew back her arm, and hurled a rock with everything she had left. The pitch was pure muscle memory, shoulder whip, follow through, release. The stone hit the Spartor square in the jaw with a dull thunk. The alien's head snapped sideways, and with barely a pause it flicked its hand toward her. A swarm of ice bullets screamed through the air. Kate threw herself down behind the streetcar as the projectile shattered glass and tore fresh holes in the metal shell above her. Abby barely had time to breathe before the rubble around her began to stir again. The Spartor lifted his arm, palm open, and the entire mound of wreckage rose with it. He twisted his wrist and the pile spun like a cyclone. "Damn it!" Abby shouted, diving again. She hit the ground hard as the mass of concrete and steel hurtled sideways, flattening the barricade she just used for cover. Dust and shards blanketed her back. When she looked up, the Spartor was already raising his other hand, palm glowing cold blue, ready to fire another volley. A blur crashed into his side. Kyle, he hit like a linebacker, driving the blade low and hard. The dagger punched through the alien's flank just below the ribs. A thick jet of dark blue blood exploded out, splattering across Kyle's arms and face. The liquid was colder than ice, burning where it touched his skin. He yanked the blade free instantly, remembering too well what happened when metal stayed buried. The Spartor roared, the sound shaking the windows of the surviving buildings. It swung wildly, catching Kyle with the edge of its forearm. The blow wasn't clean, but the force still sent him spinning across the pavement. He hit hard, the air punching out of his lungs, and spat blood onto the frost. "Kyle!" Abby screamed. Kate threw another rock, then another, each one clanging uselessly off the alien's armor but drawing its attention away from Kyle. The moment its head turned, Abby seized her chance. She grabbed a broken drone propeller lying near a heap of rubble, a jagged curve of alloy, edges wickedly sharp. The weight made her arm shake, but she swung anyway, using every ounce of speed she had left. The blade sliced across the back of the Spartor's neck, leaving a deep diagonal gash that sprayed cold mist and blue blood. The creature howled, a low metallic screech that vibrated in their teeth. Its hand snapped outward, both of them, and the world answered. The ground erupted. Pavement cracked open, throwing up stones and dirt in a violent storm. Water from the broken mains joined in, freezing midair, turning the chaos into a storm of sand, rock, and ice bullets. The gust hit like a wall. Kyle dug behind the downed aircraft hull, chest burning with every breath. He pressed a hand against his side. Blood. The earlier hit had broken ribs, maybe punctured a lung. Every breath hissed with pain. He crouched low, shielding his head as shards of ice and concrete screamed past. One jagged piece raked his back, tearing through his jacket. Warmth spilled down his spine, freezing almost instantly in the cold. The storm roared around him, slicing at his skin. He curled tighter, vision blurring. Every sound was muffled except the relentless hiss of debris. Then, silence. The wind died as fast as it had begun. Kyle forced himself upright, staggering out from behind the wreckage, his breath fogged in thick plumes. Across the field of rubble, the Spartor stood motionless, both arms slightly raised, frost swirling at its feet. Its breathing had steadied again, the blue blood running down its side slowed to a drip. Abby saw him turn and moved first. She sprinted from cover, the broken drone blade still in her hand, her steps crunching on the frozen debris. Kate saw it too. She lobbed another rock, shouting to draw the alien's eye. It worked for a heartbeat. The Spartor caught the stone in midair, crushed it to dust, and spun toward Abby. She was already mid-leap. The alien's hand shot out faster than she could react. It caught her by the arm, then swung, hurling her through the air like a rag doll. She hit a pile of twisted metal with a brutal clang. A sharp cry escaped her throat as she slid down the rubble, then stopped. A length of rebar jutted clean, and through her abdomen. For a frozen moment she stared at it, shock smothering the pain. Then gravity pulled her off the spike, and she fell to the ground. Blood pooled fast and dark beneath her. Abby, Kyle's voice cracked. He took a step, but his knee gave out. Every muscle screamed. He could only watch as she pushed herself onto her hands and knees, trembling, blood dripping onto the frost. The Spartor turned toward her. Its chest rose once, slow and deliberate. It began to walk. Kate screamed, flinging another rock that clanged off its shoulder. Stay away from her. The alien didn't even glance her way. It closed the distance, blue eyes burning. Abby staggered upright. Her legs shook, one hand clutching her side to keep pressure on the wound. She lifted her chin, defiant despite the blood running down her arm. The Spartor stopped about 8 feet away. Frost spread under its feet again. Its hands rose, fingers splayed. The debris around it began to tremble, small pieces first, then larger ones. Chunks of stone, broken girders, and slabs of concrete lifted slowly into the air, orbiting above like satellites. Abby's breathing came in short gasps. Her eyes darted between the hovering debris and the alien's expressionless face. Then the Spartor clenched its hand. The suspended wreckage twisted together, forming a jagged mass the size of a truck. The creature's arm lifted higher, as though willing the pile above its head to obey. Kyle could only watch, helpless, pain blurring his vision. Kate was shouting something he couldn't hear, another rock in her hand. Abby straightened, blood still dripping from her fingertips. She met the creature's gaze, unflinching. The Spartor's fingers began to turn. The mountain of debris groaned above her, ready to fall. Thank you for reading this chapter. Your support means the world to me. If you enjoyed it, please consider giving a thumbs up, leaving a positive review or a comment. It truly helps a debut author like myself. As this is my first novel, I am still learning, and I would love to hear your constructive feedback to help me improve. I'll do my best to reply to your comments. Brenda.